So they caught me in Greece, and they knew I was here this afternoon, so here I am. And for those of you who don't know me or don't know the Media Lab, I've been at MIT for over 50 years, almost 60. I went as a student. President Kennedy was the President of the United States, puts it in context. And I did all the architecture degrees thinking that I would walk out of MIT being an architect. And during the trip of becoming an architect, I met computers, and I met some of the greatest computer scientists of the world who were at MIT or were visiting the ones who were at MIT, and decided that the intersection of mathematics, science with art and architecture was computers, and built the Media Lab. It didn't happen overnight, but it was a startup. And MIT as an institution has startups within it. We were 3 people. Everybody thought it was stupid, but one of the 3 people was the former president of MIT. So, advice to startups, always include the president of an important institution as one of your partners. And it grew from 3 people to 800 people today, to $100 million a year of research in areas from biotech to anything that isn't done elsewhere. And to give you a sense of what that means, when we put out faculty advertisements to get faculty to apply to positions that are available in our department, we put the word misfit in the first sentence. We say, if you are a misfit, academically, intellectually, entrepreneurially, come see us. And we even further down in the advertisement, you can go look, I'm not inventing this. Further down, we say, if you can get a faculty appointment in a normal department someplace else, either at MIT or another university, go there. Don't come to us. And so we have a building full of very idiosyncratic people, and I have been involved with them for all those years, let's say 35 of those years, out of which many startups came. And so my opening remarks is going to come from the experience I had with those startups, about 40 of which I actually funded myself, which was a mistake. You never follow my funding advice because most of them didn't go anywhere. But the experience I had, and I have now looking back, is not necessarily what you're going to want to hear. But let me tell it to you anyway. First of all, I think there is a kind of MIT startup which I've become to sort of see the difference between what I'll call a Harvard startup and an MIT startup. Now, by the way, we recognize Harvard as the best university in the world, partly because we're an institute, but it's also because the two work quite closely and with great admiration. But the Harvard students that start companies do it usually around business models. We're going to make a new business model to do something, which is okay, I guess. But the MIT students tend to do it around an invention. They've invented something. They've discovered something. And then they shape that into a startup. So I'm not saying one's better than the other, but there is a distinct MIT flavor to the startups, which, as an institution, we're very proud of. Now, we're proud of them to a certain point. While I funded startups, more as a hobby, I never did one myself because I thought it was a conflict of interest. And the conflict wasn't that I was breaking a rule or MIT faculty start companies all the time, but it felt to me a little bit like having an affair or some relationship that wasn't your main focus, in my case, building the Media Lab. And now what I've noticed And it's something I've written about, and I get criticized for writing about it because I'm criticizing the startup community and some of the changes that have happened in the past 40 years. And let me illustrate the change with a number that is just by way of example. It's almost perfectly accurate, but we graduate about 50 students a year with MSs or PhDs. Maybe if you look back 30 years, the average is maybe something like 40. I used to count on half of those students going off and doing something really big, really hard, really long-term. It might be eliminating poverty, it might be nuclear fusion, it could be, there are many axes of really big, long-term, hard problems. Today, with not too much exaggeration, out of 50, 2 do that. So what do the other 48 do, which they weren't doing before, perhaps? Well, half of them, and it's almost exactly half of them, go work for Google or Facebook or Apple or Microsoft and get enormous salaries, unbelievable salaries, 10 times what an assistant professor earns at MIT. And what happens to their research? It's locked up in a box. It's closed. You have to sign a non-disclosure agreement to have lunch at Google or Facebook. Just lunch. We're not talking about even advising anybody. So it's gotten the big things, it's so closed. Send me, if you can ever find one, a paper written by Apple or by an employee of Apple. Tell me if you met an Apple employee at a conference or in a seminar or in a meeting. No, you don't. By policy, it's closed. Whereas when I was a student and a young faculty member, Bell Labs was like MIT. I could walk down the corridor of MIT, and even though spatially not right next door, I could walk into a corridor of Bell Labs, and it was just like MIT. It was home. And we circulate. IBM was like that too. It was pretty open. And so that's changed. So that's where half of those 48 students go. And that bothers me because their work is in some sense closed or gone or limited to a very small area that may or may not surface in a product and the product of one company. So now what do the other half do? The other half do what you're doing in this room. They're doing startups. Now, I look at that and I say to myself, okay, I know why. It's fun. The cost of entry is low. You can do it with your roommate, your boyfriend, a little circle of acquaintances. You're your own boss. You in many cases can, as I said, do it out of your apartment. But the bad news about that is that they're usually very small ideas. They're not big ideas. And so the good news is that the bigger ones, or should we say, the invention-oriented ones, can have a very big impact in the sense they'll be not just acquired, but they might influence the industry. So I will end with sort of a very counterintuitive sort of recommendation for those of you who do startups. In the category of, let's say, the smaller, you do something small that is perhaps likely, maybe because of your persona, to succeed. And you get capital, you get venture capital. And what's the first thing they tell you? It's the new F word. It's focus. Focus. So make a small idea smaller. And that's the sign or the route to success. And I urge you not to. When somebody tells you focus, pull back a little, pop up a level, look a little bit hard, say, well, do they really mean focus? Or is there, in fact, a wider point of view that could, in fact, be the long-term benefit of your startup? Because the best vision in the world is peripheral vision. It's not focus. So I'll end with that somewhat counterintuitive remark, and I think I've hit my 10 minutes more or less on the head. Thank you very much.